Hi everybody, welcome to your Week 8 video lesson. Today we're doing Unit 3, Compare and Contrast. So what is going on this week? It should say Week 8, so let me go ahead and just, if I can write, Week 8. We're going to pretend that's legible. So you have your content lessons for 3.8 and 3.5, also for 5.1 and 5.2, so we're starting a new unit this week. You have the 3.8 quiz due on Monday, 3.5 compare and contrast paragraph due on Wednesday, and a 5.2 quiz due on Friday. We also have our Class Connect sessions on Monday and on Wednesday at 9 a.m. So what are we covering in this video? We are going to review, compare, and contrast. We're going to review the end of Unit 3 assignment. We're going to review the jobs of sentences. We're going to look at organizational patterns. We're going to look at a sample paragraph, and we're going to talk about what not to do in your paragraphs. So let's get started. When you compare two things, you look at their similarities. When you contrast two things, I can't speak today, you look at their differences. So compare, same, contrast, different. This is your Unit 3 final, compare and contrast. So when you download it or when you look at it on our content on the website, this is what it looks like. So you go to content, you go to Unit 3, you go to 3.5 workshop, and then you go to assessment. And like I said for the last video lesson, there's a bunch of things in that folder that you should download. So this is one of those things in the folder. This is the final assignment. It is due when? On Wednesday. When you open that document, this is what it looks like. I went over this in the Week 7 video, so we're just going to cruise right over it this time. I'm just going to read the highlighted stuff. So select two stories that you have read in this course or from outside this course. Write one paragraph comparing and contrasting the two stories. Look at the literary elements you have learned about in this course, like the following, so setting, characters, narrative arc, dialogue, plot, POV, and theme. You can compare and contrast these elements in the two stories you select. So in last week's video, we talked about how to, like the steps to getting there as a whole. This week, what we're going to focus on is the steps to getting to that final paragraph. So the first thing that you do is you look back at your planning document. The second thing you do is review the jobs of sentences format and think about how you want to organize your paper or your paragraph. And the third thing you do is you write your compare and contrast paragraph. So we're going to take a look at an example. Here is my planning document. This is the one we went over on Wednesday in class. So I compared and contrasted the stories of Savitri and Satyavan and Persephone and Hades. So this is, once again, my planning document that we went over in class. So here's the jobs of sentences. Remember, we have our topic sentence, concrete detail, commentary, and our concluding sentence. We learned that last week that the thing in the box is called a chunk, and what happens when you grow a paragraph is you grow it by chunks. So this time when we're writing our paragraph, we're going to take this chunk and we're going to times it by 2. So that means that we're going to have 2 sets of concrete details, and we're going to have 4 commentaries total. 2 commentaries that relate to that first concrete detail, and 2 commentaries that relate to that second concrete detail. So when we total all of this up, we should get 8 sentences. 8 sentences total. So I've looked at my planning document. I've looked at the jobs of sentences. The next thing I have to think about is how do I want to organize my paper? And there are 2 structures that you can choose to do it. So we're going to go over that right now. There's block by block and there's point by point, or block by block. There's block structure and point by point. So here is a block structure. What happens in a block structure is each block or each chunk is used to talk about one story. So in this chunk right here, I can talk about Persephone and Hades, and in this chunk over here, I can talk about Savitri and Satyavan. So that's how it would look like. And those commentaries I would use to compare and contrast the 2 stories, or to talk about the things that both compare and contrast in the 2 stories. So that, once again, is a block structure. This is a point-by-point structure. So this chunk, I would talk about one concrete detail or one literary element, and in this second chunk, I would talk about another. And that commentary, all of those commentaries, would be comparing and contrasting each of those details in the stories. So for my example, I would use setting as my first concrete detail, and I would use character or character relationships as my second concrete detail. So let's take a look at how that would look, because I want to do a point by point. That's what I've chosen for my example. You can choose something else. Don't think just because it's my example you have to go with me. Feel free to, but you also don't have to. So here's my example paragraph, and I'm going to mark out my chunks so that you can see them. And we're just going to read it to you. The myth of Persephone and Hades and the story of Savitri and Satyavan have many similarities and many differences. For example, both stories take place in the underworld, but how each character got to the underworld is different. In the myth of Persephone and Hades, Persephone is kidnapped by Hades and taken to the underworld. However, in the story of Savitri and Satyavan, Savitri follows Yamraj, the god of death, to the underworld to get her husband's life back. Both stories also feature a married couple, but each couple's relationship is different. For example, in the myth of Persephone and Hades, Persephone does not like Hades very much, and is sad when she is with him. In the story of Savitri and Satyavan, the two are deeply in love and vow to never be apart. These two stories feature many similarities, but their details show how they are quite different indeed. Okay, so there's a couple of things that I want you to notice. I want you to notice that in the topic sentence, I told you what I was going to write about. So I said, I'm going to talk about here the myth of Persephone and Hades and the story of Savitri and Satyavan. So you know exactly what I'm comparing and contrasting right from the topic sentence. In my concrete detail number 1, I talked about the underworld and how that compares and contrasts in both. Here I'll highlight Persephone and Hades and Savitri and Satyavan. Okay. So concrete detail number 1 talks about the underworld, and my commentaries for both of those details support how the underworld compares and contrasts in both of these stories. In my number 2 concrete detail, I talked about how they're both married, but they have a different relationship, and then those commentaries supported that detail. So once again, make sure that your concrete details are supported by your commentary. And make sure that you tell us what you are comparing and contrasting in that topic sentence. Here are words for comparing and contrasting. You can go ahead and screenshot this slide, and you can use these words. If you remember, if you look back at my example, I used many of these words. You do not have to use all of them. So don't look at this list and be like, oh my god, that's a lot. I got to use all of those? Not at all. But, you know, a couple here and there helps us understand that you're comparing something or contrasting. So, for example, I could say both Satyavan and Savitri and Persephone and Hades are married. That's a statement that compares the two of them. However, Satyavan and Savitri are in love and Persephone and Hades are not. So that's a sentence that tells you that they contrast. And I used both. And I used however, okay? So here are things not to include in your paper. Do not include I statements. So no, I chose to write about this or that. No, I think, no, I'm going to write about it. Don't do those things, because the simple act of you writing it and you putting it on the page shows your voice. So we don't have to see any of those I statements, because just you writing it tells us that it is your words. On the same sort of track, we don't want to see any opinions. So just the act of writing those words shows us that that is your opinion. So you don't have to point out what your opinion is, because just writing it is your opinion. Don't include too much detail. So a lot of times students think the longer I make it, the better it is. Not always the case. My paragraph was pretty short and it hit all of the benchmarks that we want you guys to hit. So don't think that I have to put more in there and it'll make it better. Focus on making sure that your details relate and your commentary relates to your details. And as long as you have that, it's good. I mean, the more things you put sometimes is just unnecessary, and you really don't have to do anything that's unnecessary for this. And don't include any dialogue. If you remember from my example, I didn't put in any quotes. Same goes for yours. We don't need any quotes. Just paraphrase it. Just give us the highlights. That works. If you have any more questions about it, always feel free to reach out. So what did we cover in this video? We reviewed compare and contrast. We reviewed the end of Unit 3 assignment, and you can find more information on that on the Unit 7 video, or Week 7 video. We reviewed the jobs of sentences and growing paragraphs by chunks. We looked at organizational patterns, so that's our block structure and our point-by-point structure. We looked at a sample paragraph, and we talked about what not to do. So once again, if you have any more questions about things to do for this assignment, make sure that you email one of us. And one last reminder, please make sure that you have your copy of The Way to Rainy Mountain because we will begin reading it this week. If you know for a fact that you never received it, go ahead and email us. If you cannot find it, go ahead and email us. But make sure that you've got it somehow, all right? And I will see you all on Monday at 9 a.m. and on Wednesday too. So have a great weekend, everybody. Bye.